Hello and welcome to episode number 1 of How Your Food Choices Affect You and Your World. I'm Pamela Ziemann with Elemental Cuisine, where we help people transition out of the sad diet to a healthier, vibrant, plant-based lifestyle. And today's theme is how your passion will lead to your purpose. And I love it when I find people who are actually doing something in the world, not just talking about making a better world, but actually doing something. And our guest today is Wayne Meador, and he's the creator, founder of aworldforchangetv.com. Welcome, Wayne.
Hey, thank you, Pamela. I'm so happy to be here on the show with you. I've been looking forward to it ever since you asked me a few weeks ago, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And I knew that I wanted to have you on the show, not only for everything that you're doing in the world, but when I saw in your tagline that you said, I love Brussels sprouts. And I thought, okay, we definitely have that in common because I love Brussels sprouts too. And
yeah.
Your busy day, you have so much going on. I'm just curious because the title of this is How Your Food Choices Affect You and Your World. So you had to make a choice, like in your busy world and life. Why did you say yes? Why did you agree to come on the show for the 30 minutes we have together? Why did you say yes to this?
Well, I don't view myself as, or my business as a typical business. So, Pamela, I'm here to make a difference in the world. I'm a tool to be used appropriately, and if I have an audience, or if you have an audience that needs to hear a specific answer, or to a challenge that we're facing as a society, as humanity as a whole, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And if we can somehow work together and collaborate, we can make a difference. We can change the trajectory of the path that we're on.
Yeah, that is so true, because it used to be in my era like the lone wolf. We're trying to do everything on our own, and I grew up in that age, and now it's like if we don't work together, I don't think we're going to make it. So the more we can share with each other and help each other, I think that's just going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's what we were talking about on the episode right before I jumped on the show here with you, was the difference in mindset, I think, from generation to generation. And we are moving into a positive future. We do have the possibility of making these right choices, and we have a lot of data now that backs up where we need to go, where we're at now, and why it's broken, and where we need to go for the future. And I don't think it's a question now of it's not a question now of are we broken. It's a question of how soon are we going to jump in and fix it together. So
exactly.
For me, that's what keeps me going. You know, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and I think that data is so important too, to know that our choices actually matter. I know I've been speaking with people for the last 20 years, and sometimes I've gone back to my hotel room and it's like, why isn't something happening? Why aren't people actually doing what they know they should be doing? And it got to the point where I was thinking that I don't know if we all really know that we matter. I mean, maybe we do more so in this day and age, but to really know that we matter and every choice we make really matters is key. So some of those statistics and the data you were talking about, do you have some of those that you could share with our listeners as far as how their everyday decisions actually matter?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do, and I want to bring up Cuba, because we all know that back in 1989 there was a food crisis in Cuba. But let's first of all talk about just how it feels to me as a consumer. I don't have the ability to grow or I shouldn't say the ability, I don't have the time to grow all of my own food and for our family. So I have to go buy some food somewhere, and I have the choice to go to drive 6 to 10 miles to the local grocery store and pick up my food. And it's probably most generally not going to be organic. Most of the time in these small towns close to where I live, you're going to get food that was shipped in from a long ways away. And it's probably the cheapest food because that's about all they can afford. They're a small business trying to make it, so to speak. And it's great to support them. But I also have an option to go up the road, 1.5 to 2 miles up the road, and support my local farmer. And it was a matter of us driving by, noticing they had produce out close to the road and have a massive amount of field that they've converted recently to growing a lot of greens. And so we stopped and knocked on their door, and what do you know? Guess what? They have whole milk available through a neighbor, and they have all kinds of fruit and veg that we can purchase. And for me as a consumer, it feels really good when you go to the farm and they say, well, what do you want today? And well, I just want to make up a juice for today and tomorrow, and I want enough veg to do it. And for $5 that he goes through, and right in front of you, you can go into the garden and pick out anything that you want. And he says, well, how about radish today, and how about cucumber today? And we put it in a bag, and for $5 to $8, we get 3 or 4. I think it's about 4 grocery bags full of fruit and veg, and you can't get that anywhere. Even your local farmers market, you don't get that kind of value. Much less do you have the option of walking through the field and picking it. So
it's so true. I think that everybody, if you have an opportunity to work for a CSA, a community-supported agriculture, go do it, because I did it one summer, and we were cutting the produce right out of the ground and eating it that afternoon, and there's nothing like the freshness of when you get it right from the farmer's field that day. It's awesome.
yeah, it really is. There's just something to be said there, and you know it tastes better. Chefs will vouch for it, and they'll say it tastes better. They want to go to the farmer's market because they know they get fresh cut fruit and veg as well. But you know, we were talking about statistics and kind of going back to how does it feel? How does it feel to go to the store and purchase your fruit and vegetables and take it home and cook it? Does it make you come alive? Do you feel good when you eat that kind of fruit and veg? Or is there a better way? Maybe there is a better way to supply our nation, our world, with healthy, good, organic, clean choices. And Cuba's doing it. So if you want to look at is there a better way, you kind of have to look at what other countries and communities and maybe cities have done in the past. And doing my research, found that since 1989, Cuba had to figure out a way to supply their own food because they no longer were able to import all the food that they needed. And they don't have oil to trade for food, so they're in an oil-scarce environment. And so they typically will, they've spent a lot of money, the government spent money on the consumer to suggest, well, hey, how about we reinvent how we produce our own food, and now they produce it mainly in their backyards. So everybody, like what we might think of California, producing a lot of solar energy in the backyards and just pumping it back to the grid because of the lease programs that we have in place now. The same kind of thing happened in Cuba, where we now can rely on the home farmer to produce much more than he would ever need on that tenth of an acre and put it back into the food grid, if you will. And on one rooftop, go ahead.
Not only is it more sustainable, but you talked about how does it feel? Like, how does it feel when you get that produce right from your backyard or from your local farmer? And I think so many of us have felt disconnected in this world. And when you pull it right out of the ground, there's a sense of feeling connected. And then the more we're connected with ourselves and with the earth, the more we're going to feel connected with other people around us. And it's just like a much safer feeling to go through life like that. So it comes down to the food. Food used to be just something you'd go to the grocery store, buy, and get enough energy to make it through your day, to get through your work day. But now it's so foundational to how we live our lives. And Cuba is a great example of that.
Yeah, and this is happening in many other areas, but back to Cuba, let's talk about what one person can provide for their community. This is a simple farmer in a single neighborhood. He raises 40 guinea pigs on his roof, 6 chickens, 2 turkeys, and more than 100 rabbits. And this is all profit for him. He has a 68 square meter system that incorporates a closed loop permaculture principle. He grows vegetables, he recycles his own organic animal waste, collects water, and exploits a number of species synergies. So he's built his own machines then for drying and preserving feed. It allows him to collect abundant waste from his property and turn it around and reuse it back into that closed loop system. And his small rooftop enterprise produces meat for area restaurants and markets, and he's one of more than 1,000 small livestock breeders in that single town. So that's what happens when we reinvest our energy and our mindset into things that we don't necessarily are thinking outside the box, and that's what they had to do to survive, to be a culture that was going to make it or not. And just imagine what your small town would look like, or my small town would look like, if we had that percentage of farmers per capita to residents who were supplying fruit and veg locally and meats locally, and feeding back into that life cycle of life, or that circular economy in that region. So I hope that gives some perspective to the big vision that I have. I think that we can all do that. Every business has an opportunity to act like that farmer in our system, and to take away the greed that rises up in the corporate monster. It's not that any one bad person, there's one bad greedy individual, or that we're all greedy because we work for a corporation that's for profit. It's just inherently the way they're designed, and it's a design that will break at some point. So we need to take advice from people like this farmer who are living in Cuba in that scenario.
Right, right. And who are we supporting? Who are we supporting when we go to the local store that's a big franchise versus going out? I know here in Sequim, Washington, there's a guy, Paul Gauchi, who runs Back to Eden. You might have seen the backtoedenfilm.com. And his place, when I go out there, he's got tours every Sunday where you can go out there and really just see how he works with his permaculture farm out there. He calls it a garden, but it's amazing. And there's such a feeling of abundance, because when I go out there, he's sharing and he's giving, and he said, I have so much, I don't know what to do with all of this, because his plants just grow like crazy because of the way he cares, for one, and he uses mulch, and it's just a really amazing feeling to go out there and feel what is possible on our planet when we just do things differently. Like, he had to do it differently because his well wasn't getting enough water. So he realized he couldn't bring in all of this water, and then he started using mulch, and then look what happens. He's got this abundant area where he serves so many people in the community.
Yeah, I think we have to get back to wherever we're at in our environment and the type of business we're in. Let's say we've already kind of built it. We're already farming. We're already like Paul was. He had his backyard set up, and he was moving through his life, and all of a sudden there's a roadblock that came into his way because of something that was man-made, a system that was man-made that failed, and he had to come up with a way to fix it. And instead of spending money back into the system to supply tons of water to him, he said, look, how about I use nature? How about I replicate nature as best as possible here in my region in Sequim, Washington? And so he did that using mulch. Therefore, he doesn't even need the water that he thought he needed to grow all of his plants. So he's changed his mindset, and that's what it's going to take for us to move forward as a society, I believe, overall.
So do you have any tips on how people watching this video can change their mindset? I mean, it's a pretty big undertaking to change all of the conditioning we've been through, all of the indoctrination, to rely upon, someone outside of ourselves. How do we even begin to change that?
Well, I think you allow yourself to be present in the moment, to be you, and that's one of the things that we have agreed to talk about, which is how to uniquely express yourself. And I don't mean to jump ahead of our conversation here, but if you're going to make change, you have to listen to your gut and know that the choices that you're making do matter, and are making a change, and then your expression will come out, because you won't be able to live against your own moral and ethical values.
It's a great point.
So I guess that's how I would kind of answer that question. I guess it's a challenge, but I think when we reach inside ourselves and we make our choices only based on our moral and ethical values, then it's pretty quick that we find out that the current systems that are in place, where we're living, and just about anywhere, whoever would be listening to this would agree with me that where they live, there's systems in place that may not help them to be sustainable, to be productive, to survive, to be creative, to live in the moment. And it's because we've been conditioned. I feel like I'm going down a path here that maybe I shouldn't be, but we've been conditioned to potentially think on a linear path with set goals in our lives rather than allowing us to live in the moment and be who we are. And if we're not careful, that will allow us to be controlled as a society, and that, whether or not that's intentional control or not, it puts us in a system like the monetary system and like the food production system that we all are already a part of each and every day, and we can't break it unless now we have to go back and completely re-educate ourselves, this whole generation, on how to do it, because we've lost it. And
I think it can be a little bit disheartening too. It was for me anyway when I first realized, wow, these big companies that have, the different brand names, they don't really care about me, and it's their job to have their bottom line for the stakeholders. And so I had to start learning to take care of myself, which really can be disheartening when you think about all these authority figures that we've looked up to for so long. Actually, maybe you're just trying to control us without having our best interests in mind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's always some potential corporate interest or challenge that's going to sway our government's policies and where they're going with it. But I think, I've learned when we've had guests on our show at World for Change TV, we've learned in a couple of episodes that we can't dwell on those challenges, but we have to build new systems, new economies, new processes that we can put in place to fill the void when the old falls away. I know that you and we talked about this animal challenge, this animal rights and a hog massacre story that
right. We both have a hog massacre story.
Yeah, and I think that kind of could fit in here, because of us as consumers having to make choices with our money and with our time and with our effort.
So let me just say briefly to let the audience members know that when Wayne and I were talking earlier, somehow the subject came up that my parents live a half mile from a major hog confinement situation. And it wasn't, there were no people there involved at all. It was all mechanical. And the air conditioning broke down, and so all of these hogs died, all of them. There were hundreds piled up right outside. You could see it from my parents' house, but they were just piled high because they all died. There was no way for them to get out. And then, Wayne, what was your story about how you saw this?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a couple of times, but the first main story was I grew up in central Indiana. It's pork-producing country. It's the pork-producing capital of the world. And it was all factory farms, and there was a fire. And the fire trapped all of the animals inside, and there was, again, several hundred, just as in your scenario there, which died. And we, being a contractor, had to go and bury all of them out in the field. So, it brought the community together because everybody pitched in and worked together. But the backside of this story is that there's got to be a better way. It doesn't feel right. And we were talking about that earlier in this show, that how do you know when you're making the right choices? How do you know you're doing the right thing? And you have to look inside yourself.
And you have to feel. I think we've been trained to be in our heads so much that sometimes we're disconnected from our heart. And when we step back and we go, oh, okay, so maybe this isn't just about how much we can produce. It's not just about how much money we can make, but how does this feel? How does this feel for me? And how do I feel when I make those kind of choices?
Yeah, that I agree with you there. Now, as far as applying it to, well, let's back up. Let's look at back at how I feel. You know, we had talked about how we know that our choices matter at an intimate level, and it all does go back to the feeling. But you also have to look at things with a logical perspective, and I know, at least for my left brain, I know that I have to feel good about making that choice, but I'm still going to challenge it. And I know for me, one of my shows on A World for Change is Question Everything. I always challenge whatever topic is before me, to the point that I probably overanalyze it. But I'm hoping that that knowledge will, I guess, come out in my passion and in the value that I bring to your audience. So.
Well, definitely, because we need the left brain and the right brain. So it's got to feel good, but most of the time when we do things like that and you look at the numbers, like I know Paul Gauchi's farm, for example, his numbers are definitely up there, and he's producing way more than a lot of the farmers in the Midwest that have monocrop. And if you look at the nutrient per acre, I mean, how many nutrients are you getting per acre? That is a good question. And then also some of the studies that come up that say organic isn't as nutritious as conventionally grown food. Well, if you have your own refractometer, if you look at these things yourself, you can get the numbers. And it's very, even when I do different lifestyle changes myself, I would see my blood work come down. I would see the changes, and when I see the results that I'm getting because of my specific actions, it makes me feel good, and it makes me want to do more of that. And I know the ripple effect, like we've talked about, it goes on and on. It goes out there. And then I think if we feel better, other people around us are going to feel better. If we're creating more beauty rather than massacred hogs out there, you know, everybody just feels better. It's a better world.
Yeah, that's right. You know, you mentioned back to the nutrient density of food. There's a group, and I like to bring up resources because I think it's something that your audience is really going to appreciate. There's a community on Google Plus that's focused on home and garden field trials. And one of the most recent field trials that was done was with a couple of individuals who run fairly successful YouTube channels, and they tested the quality of food. They had a control group. They had a group with worm castings with carbon worm castings that had inoculated a carbon base, and also rock dust. And they treated all three of those the same way and tested them all at the end, tested the food quality with, for nutrients, and they tested the dirt quality as well. And it's a really interesting set of tests that were quite surprising, even for me, for everybody that was involved in the gardening community. But it's these kinds of things that help us to move forward as a society. And we were talking again, how do we know our choices matter? Well, gosh darn it, I know that my choice to support the home and garden field trials and to bring that knowledge to more people to light will matter, because it's facts. It's straight up facts, and people get the choice on how they utilize it or not. And their choice can either be to allow that knowledge to help them to be more sustainable or less sustainable in their life, but that their life impacts the future of the world and the planet in the big picture. And So those are one small, simple little examples in ways that people can take little things that we do every day that's happening around us and that we have access to apply to their life, to use other people's knowledge that's challenged the topic and use that to move forward rather than having to relearn it yourself, and you would be a whole year behind in your knowledge and learning curve because of it. So hopefully the knowledge that we bring to your audience and to our audience at A World for Change TV, and using this medium that we're allowed to use here for free on Google Plus and Hangouts, we can shift the future of humanity. We can become a healthier group of individuals, and we can make a difference. And I have a lot of faith in us as a human race. So.
Yes. Wayne, you are such an inspiration. I just love having you on the show, and just to know that every choice we make either leads us to more sustainability or less, and every one of us matters out there. Is there any last comments you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, well, my last thought really is this, that you challenge everything that's before you. I think I speak about topics in that way or from that perspective, and I really hope that you, the audience member, will take a step back when you're looking at anything around you, and just question it. Question everything. Don't take it for face value, because there's usually always something else about it that's there. Not saying it's bad, but something that will give you better insight to make a good choice moving forward.
Right. And then when we question everything, we can make informed decisions, not just conditioned. Yeah. So anyway, I see that we're at the end of our half an hour here, Wayne, and I just want you to know out there in the audience that all of your comments, we will respond to them. We didn't get around to it in the show, but we will respond on an individual basis. I've got another show coming up next week and for the next 5 weeks on taking this to another level. Really great speakers coming up. So thank you very much, Wayne, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Pamela. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.